We are lucky to have as our guest today a person who received recently worldwide publicity. I mean, you did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to another edition of Odyssey House Journals, and you're wondering how that has anything to do with addiction and recovery. It does. I'm your host, Randall Carlisle, my co-host, Nicole Slack, and our guest, he is Leonard Weaver, but you prefer LT.
Yeah, that's what everybody calls me.
Okay. And so everybody who just heard my initial tease line is, if they didn't see the news, you just accomplished a major feat that when I first saw the story, I got tired reading it. I talked to Nicole, and she's in better shape than me, and she said, "Oh my God!" So
I tried.
Yeah, you actually tell us what you did.
So I have a recovery program, and it's peer support, and so I'm trying to I talked to a marketing lady one time, and she says, if you believe in what you believe in, you need to go on a mountaintop and shout it out. So this whole ride was for recovery, and everybody that's in recovery being abstinence from drugs, alcohol, or whatever addiction might be, right? And so I attempted to ride my bike from Salt Lake to St. George this year.
And now people see this all over the world, and so describe the trip for people who don't know much about Utah. That's a long trip.
It's
right?
basically from the top of Utah to the bottom of Utah, but since we weren't traveling down I-15, the main interstate, there was more back roads and actually dipped into Arizona and then back up to St. George. The total trip was 430 miles.
And you did this.
I didn't do this.
You didn't do it.
So I started 7 a.m. that morning. News was there. Social media publicity's on point. We're shouting it from the mountaintop. About 3 a.m. the next night, I'm about 250 miles in, and my body just shut down. So I had to get online and take an L, humbly take an L that I did not finish this. So next year, I'm going to give it another attempt. But I did accomplish 250 miles, about maybe making it a little over halfway before I basically fell off my bike.
250 miles in what time frame?
From 7 a.m. till about 2:30 was it I gave up? Yeah, no, 2:30. My wife was driving, Kelsey was, and my son were there also as my support crew, because you have to have a car and you have to try to eat right, and that's where I screwed up. My first 20 miles was a screw up. I didn't take it as seriously as I should. There's 24 different transition stations to stop and fuel, fix the bike if it needs to be fixed, change clothes. And because I wasn't properly paying attention, I've done a bunch of 100-mile races this year, and I was eating for this 430-mile race like I was just riding 100 miles. And so by the time, I think I bonked at like the 6th transition station and finally got some good longevity type carbs in me. It's a whole science. It's insane. And then kept riding, and then it got to about 2 in the morning, and I was about 200 miles. It's cold. I'm bundled up, and I can't quit sweating. So I completely got dehydrated. My fuel I was already too behind. And once you get behind on your fuel and carb loading and all that stuff, you've messed up. And that's what I did as I messed up. So I tried about 30 miles. I'm going as fast as I can. I'm only doing about 8 miles an hour. And you got to realize this 430-mile trip, 320 miles of it is uphill. It's uphill to about 3/4 of the way through this ride. And,
wow.
And if you can make it to that 320,
then you're good.
Then it's mostly downhill. Had I made it, and I was still 70 to 80 miles away from even hitting the point of downhill. And I'm swerving all over the road. I'm kind of passing out, not because I'm dizzy or anything like that, but falling asleep my body's just shutting down. And I'm trying to pedal. And these guys are behind me, and I pull over, and I'm like, just come up here. And I lean on the bed of the truck, and I'm like, I can't do it, honey. Talking to my wife, and she's like, just give it another try. Go to the next one. I don't want you to give up because your mind is telling me, she wanted to make sure my body was done.
Yeah. So
I got back on the bike, and I rode another 5-6 miles, the best I could. And these guys were watching me going, okay, it's for safety reasons, let's pull him off because if I did end up on a downhill part trying to steer this bike, it was like I was drunk. It felt like I had taken pills and was drunk. I was slurring my speech. I couldn't stand up and had to throw in the towel, unfortunately.
Wow. That tires me out just hearing that. I thought you made it.
Yeah, I wish.
Wow.
Next year.
What are you going to do differently?
Next year, I'm not going to focus so much on publicity because, like I said, it was a stunt for my program.
Right.
I want people,
And that's sort of, it's like, I got to make it now.
yeah, mission accomplished, doing what we wanted to do. Next year, I have to turn that part of me off, and I have to focus. And I've already started training. I average 500 miles a month on my bike, plus the workouts that I do. Yeah. And this week, I've already done about 150 miles. But that's in between mountain biking and street cycling, plus my HIIT workouts that I do. And so next year when I go to the race, I'm going to be way more prepared. My mind is only going to be focused on what I need to do at that transition station, what fuel I need to eat, how much time I need to spend there, 3 minutes, and then on to the next one. And if I can't accomplish it next year, because if you look at me, I'm not a cyclist. I'm a little thick, a little heavy.
Well, you look like you're in pretty good shape to me, but
a cyclist is
big
usually
biceps,
a buck 20, and their biceps are usually about that big, you know?
I guess that's a good point.
Yeah.
Now, you are in recovery.
Yes, absolutely.
Describe your trek through addiction.
Oh, man. So I was born here in Ogden, Utah, back in '79. I'm 45 years old now. I grew up in a family that was divorced when I was very young. My dad was an addict himself. Could never hold a job, keep a job, take care of my sister and I, which he still to this day is an addict in his late 70s, and he's doing his thing, and just surviving, just waiting for the phone call one day. Me and my sister are. But back in our early years, we lived in a trailer park. My grandma raised us, and so by my early teens, I was already into drug abuse and criminal. My first charges were when I was 12 for vandalism, and
when you're 12,
yeah, I was breaking windows. And one of the main reasons I got in trouble is because of the way that I talked to the cop. He asked me, "What's your name?" And I said, "It's LT." He goes, "What does that stand for?" I said, "You're a detective. Figure it out."
Oh, jeez.
They
don't like that, do they?
That didn't help. Yeah. And so by the time...
So you were a smart ass back then.
I deserved every punishment I got.
Yes.
Yes. By the time I was 13, my dad got into a relationship with this woman, moved me and my sister out to Michigan. We lived in Michigan for 5 years, and by the time I was 14 or 15, I dropped out of high school. I bought a car for my science teacher, working at McDonald's, and I left. I like to tell people I moved out early, but it was somebody told me, "No, you were young, you ran away."
Yes. Yes.
So looking on it, I ran away when I was like 14, 15. Haven't been home since, but that's where I really got heavy into crank back in the day, acid. Smoking weed every day, drinking every day, just a mess. I got into a bunch of trouble out in Michigan, went to jail a few times. My brother, who is still here in Utah, who's 9 years older than I am, calls me and says, "Get your butt back to Utah." So I come back here. I changed places, but nothing changes, right? And I continue down the same path.
You mean all that's available in Utah?
Right.
Jeez.
Wherever you go, there you are.
Yes.
And whatever you want and whatever you're looking for, it's available.
Right.
And we all know that in recovery. And so I got back here and to speed up the story a bit, by the time I was in my 20s, I was severely addicted to meth. I was running around Ogden. I was a tweaker. I was the guy that'll steal your wallet, help you look for it, and it's committing crimes. All the meth stuff that happens in the dark, when you're awake for days and days on end. Ended up getting caught for a burglary and went to jail for a year. I did a year in Weber County. I did 4 months in the nuke program with this second-degree felony. I'd relapsed in between my jail stints. So I got out for like a month, relapsed, and went back in and was sitting in front of the judge about getting ready to be sentenced for 15 years in prison. And that kind of scared me straight. So
that would.
I went to the nuke program, took it seriously. At least I obeyed the rules. I got out, started working, stayed away from any hard drugs. And the day I got off probation, I got a bag of weed and started smoking weed again. So nothing changed addiction-wise or wanting to not get high. I became a pothead for years after that, daily. In my pocket, morning, noon, night type of pothead. In 2008, 2009, I quit smoking weed only because I wanted to climb the ladder. I had a wife then. I had a couple of kids. That's my 18-year-old over there. And I needed a job that required drug testing. Only reason I quit smoking weed. And so I quit smoking weed, got this new, better job, started getting into fitness. And then now you got to see God's hands on me through this whole time. There's a couple stories in my life that are miraculous and don't make sense. Unless you're looking at it through a sovereign God who's in control of things. And 2010, I'm a felon. I do not have a high school diploma, a GED, nothing. I'm almost 30 at this point. I fill out an application to work on base. They hire me. They give me a secret clearance with the United States Air Force, and I work on F-22s as soon as they arrived at Hill.
At Hill Air Force Base, you got hired with those credentials.
Yes.
Whoa. That's
Unexplainable.
Okay.
It's a very small, people don't, have a hard time getting a job at Arby's.
Right.
But I end up with a secret clearance, and I'm working on F-22 aircraft, one of the baddest weapon system there is out there.
Yeah.
F-35s are cool too, but it's the 22. 5 years later, I switch over to the F-35 program, and I'm climbing the ladder fast. I get all kinds of awards. I'm the civilian of the quarter a few times. I've gotten multiple awards, all these different types of trainings. During this time, we've sold our first house. We bought our next house, a nice big house in Pleasant View, my wife and I, and I've gone away from searching and seeking God, doing anything that's spiritually fit for a person that needs to, in recovery. I started getting proud, arrogant. We had a nice house. We were buying the cars. We were doing the razor thing, and I started drinking on the weekends. And this is where it goes really bad by the time I'm 35. Drinking, Super Bowl parties, right? All that. And it turns into a pint a night. I'm trying to maintain or not drink more. I'm limiting myself to a pint a night. You know how that works for
Sure,
alcoholics.
I do.
So it's a pint
Nicole? Yes.
It's a pint a night during the week. Weekends, blackout drunk. As much whiskey as I could possibly fit in my guts. And doing stupid stuff, right? And during this time, my wife and I's relationship's going this way.
Sure.
My reputation at work is going this way because during the work week, I'm showing up to work drunk.
Did they know?
Oh, yeah. When you're in a mechanics environment, because I was a mechanic a lot of this time, working on the F-35s, it's construction type mentality.
Okay.
Hey, go stand over there,
Sure.
and stink a little bit, But, you kind of get accolades from people who don't understand addiction or alcoholism, or maybe they're in denial themselves that they're alcoholics. Like the worse you stink and how much you drank last night, you almost get high fives for.
Right.
And so I end up progressing through work, and I get a desk job, but nothing changes. I'm still drinking. And then 2017 is where it really gets bad. My youngest son, he's 9 years old. Zylan was in it too, my oldest boy right there. That if you guys look this up on the news, you can find it on KSL, Fox 13, ABC. 2017, Pleasant View, 7 kids in a UTV. They had this little truck, little dump bed UTV, little farm truck. My buddy lived across the street, his kids and my kids, best friends. And they would drive this little farm truck over to our house, sleep in the back. We put speakers in it, and they just put around. Thing only did 8 miles an hour. But on this particular day, May 30th, around 10 o'clock, I left work because my computer wouldn't work. And they take this UTV up the hill, and they get it going about 45 miles an hour, and it flips. It threw all 7 kids out of the UTV, which they all went that way. And then my 9-year-old son, he happened to hang on and ended up underneath it. And the back tire landed on his head and crushed it and drug him down the road. It cracked his skull from ear to ear like this. And I heard the wreck. And you gotta remember, I'm an alcoholic during this time. So I left work early, and guess where the first place I stopped was? The liquor store.
Sure.
Of course. It's noon-ish. I sit at my computer. I've taken my first couple gulps off my whiskey. It's noon. It's like, I got the day off. I'm going to do what I do.
Yeah.
Drink. I think it was probably even close to the weekend. So I might have, doing what alcoholics do. And so the crazy thing is during this tragic accident, what's going on back here in my mind is I run out to my oldest son comes running, Dad, just freaking out. There's an accident. So I run up, and it happened right in front of our house, like just a house up. And they're in this intersection. The car's flipped over. Another crazy, miraculous timeline is my sister lived 2 blocks up the street. She happened to be pulling out and witnessed this accident. And she's a nurse. So she zooms up there, kind of just assesses the situation, sees all the kids crawling around. Some of them, their bones are sticking out of their legs. He broke his back, and she runs over to Link, and that's my 9-year-old boy, and he's dead. And so she flips him over. She's doing CPR on him. By the time I get there, she's finishing CPR, and he chokes. He starts trying to breathe, but he's got blood coming out of every hole in his face. And so I grab my sister, I chuck her, and I flip him over. to let the blood drain out of his mouth so he can breathe. And I'm just like, and his eyes like hanging out of his head, and it just, you crazy. I'm trying to be graphic so you understand like what I went through at this moment. And the miraculous timeline with my sister, CPR me, flipping him on his side, letting the blood come out so he can breathe. A few minutes later, a doctor out of nowhere, wearing shorts and a t-shirt, shows up with a bag, zip, undoes his bag, turns on this machine, starts doing all this suction stuff. Cops come, take over, pull me off of him, and I'm just covered in his blood. Ambulance, life flight, boom, we're at the University of Utah. Just like that. And the crazy thing is we get to McCady and Ogden. I see the doors open when they push him in, boom, and they shut, right? And there's doctors. As soon as it opens, I see like 20 doctors just standing there ready. And I'm like, is it that bad? Like how bad, I'm trying to assess how bad. Is my son going to live through this to begin with? Because it doesn't look like it. We fly over to McCady. I ride in the helicopter with him. Same thing. Next time the doors open, poof, there's twice as many doctors, and they've already sent x-rays. And we end up staying there that night, and then we moved up to a place in the hospital where Ronald McDonald House kind of has a thing, and then we end up moving in the Ronald McDonald House. Now, back to my mind, back here. The cops show up. I'm holding my son, and the first thing I say is, I just opened a beer and took a couple drinks, and then I heard this happening. So I was trying to throw out a justification of why they might smell alcohol on me during this insane accident. Talk about the alcoholic mind. And that's where I'm at. That tells you
I would have done the same thing.
The depravity of me, right?
I wasn't great. It was just one beer.
Yeah, I just had a beer, and then this accident.
And if I'm the cop, I'm saying, I didn't even ask you, pal. I don't need to know that.
Yeah. So that's going on in my head. And now we're staying at the Ronald McDonald House. We're getting reports from the doctors. We're meeting with them every day. And they always started off, if he makes it through tonight, if he makes it through this afternoon, if he makes it through this evening, this is what we can expect, that kind of stuff. And I'm at this time, I told you I was trying to maintain with a pint a week, to limit how much I would drink so I could try to get them to go to work. I had already figured out where all the liquor stores were close to the Ronald McDonald House as we're staying there. We put work off. Everything just was on hold. My son's in the hospital. He might die tomorrow.
Except for your drinking.
Except my drinking. Yeah. And we would get done visiting him at the hospital. I would hit a liquor store. I would take it up into my room at the Ronald McDonald House.
Jeez.
And I would get snot cry, belligerent drunk, flipping God off. F you, how could you let this happen? Kind of thing. So
you were hardcore.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
He ends up in the hospital for a couple months, and then the biggest moment I'm trying to like get to without crying here on air, but he's comatose. He's brain dead. They put all the doctors you don't see are in the room, making a case study out of what this kid's brain is doing because it's sheared and all kinds of stuff. And the doctor comes in and he's like, we have to fix the fractures in his face. His head's crushed. His cheek was completely crushed. His jaw's broken. It broke down through here, like the rim, So his collarbone and his ribs were broken, and they had to reconstruct all his face and all that kind of stuff. He goes, but in order to do that, we have to put a feeding tube and a feeding tube and a trach so that he can eat and breathe. And they have to wire his mouth shut and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, and if we do that, you're going to sustain life in this. So this weekend, I want you and your wife to go home and consider pulling the plug. Do you want to take this home with you and have to take care of this? And at that moment, when he's like this, there's nothing in his eyes, his tongue's sticking out. That was probably the heaviest moment of my life. There's that line in our lives. It was always befores and afters, and sure, when we describe our lives, and this is one of them. So we go home, back to the Ronald McDonald House. I drink as much as I can, and now I'm drinking as much as I don't care. I'm not trying to limit anything. I just want to be as blackout drunk as I can possibly be. We get back that next Monday. The doctor comes in and squeezes Link on his shoulder, and he's like, I'm going to squeeze him real hard, but you got to give it about a minute because it's taken the brain so long to respond to things. And he squeezes him, and then about a minute later, he goes, just a little twitch. He's like, that's a good sign. He goes, let's give this kid a chance. And that heavy weight fell off. And so we gave him a chance, and he started doing better. He started sitting up, not on his own. He physical therapist holding him and stuff. They ended up actually having to cut his skull out and let his brain swell. And So they removed his front skull, let his brain swell, and it started setting him up, and his mouth dropped shut, and he's got the trach and feeding tube. And by this time, okay, he's not going to die. He's actually progressing. So I go home because I got my other kids, right? I got 2 older boys and a daughter that I got to take care of. So we go home and we build a deck on the front of my house. And I build this deck thinking my kid's going to be in a wheelchair for sure the rest of his life with a feeding tube. And like, we didn't know how bad, we knew how bad he was as we were looking at him. And we just kind of figured that he's going to get a little better than this, but not much. And so I built this huge deck, picturing my wife, rolling him out there in the morning, drinking coffee on the porch. It had a wheelchair ramp. And so we build that. I go back to work eventually, and now I'm drinking a 5th or more every day, every single day. I was remodeling the house at the time, which means when you're an alcoholic and you remodel, you do nothing but just tear things down. You don't put nothing back. And so we're sitting all of us for a moment, we're living in our motorhome in the driveway. And I had gotten a couple bedrooms back to good enough. So the kids moved back in, the wife moved back in there, and I just stayed in the motorhome. And I was drinking as blackout drunk. Sure. August 19th-ish, 2018. And I call my dad, I think Monday or Tuesday morning. I'm not sure. Dad, if you don't come and get me and take me to a hospital, I'm going to drink myself to death. Not that I was suicidal. I'm going to die doing this. And because I was just blackout drunk, my wife and I weren't talking. She's taking care of our kid who just got out of the hospital with a trach and feeding tube. The trach was out, but he still had a feeding tube for a little while. So she's in there feeding him, and I'm just blackout piece of crap drunk during this whole thing. And so he checks me into a hospital. They say, nah, go back. You're still too belligerent. We're not, until you sober up a bit, we're not bringing you in. And it was like Tuesday morning, like 10 a.m. or something. So they took me to a hotel. My wife shows up about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, feeds me a bunch of McDonald's or something, takes me back in. I check into detox. I get detoxed off alcohol. And then I come out and I'm like, I need to do something with my hands. I've been working inside a secret dungeon on airplanes, pale and drinking. And so I tore this deck down, which ended up becoming a metaphor for my life. And I have the pictures on my Facebook page. I tore this old rickety deck down, and then I built a brand new one, 20 by 20 for this lady off the ground. It's beautiful. And it became a metaphor for what I was going to do with my life. I literally tore something old completely down and threw it on the fire. And then I built this beautiful redwood deck, stained it with linseed oil. And then as soon as that deck was finished, I checked myself into Action Recovery in South Ogden. Sure. Then I spent 6-8 months in that recovery program. But I did relapse at 47 days in. So August 19th, 47 days later to August 5th, I believe, somewhere-ish around in there, I'm kicking against the fact that I'm not powerless over alcohol. I just had a mess up, and now I'm good. I haven't had to drink for 47 days. So I go buy 3 shots of whiskey, just one of those little half pints, and take it home. And I'm like, I'm in control. Look, it's in my drawer. I'll drink it when I want to drink it. So take the family out to dinner. We go to freaking some Mexican restaurant, and I come back, and I'm like, now I'll drink it because I chose to. Took 3 shots or so. Go back to group, telling myself, I drank last night, and this is why. Because I'm in control, and I just proved it. Like you could see, look, I drank when I wanted to drink. I didn't go crazy. I didn't drink more than that. And I sold my wife the same bill of goods, and she's like, okay, and as us addicts do, or manipulations. I get to group on a week after I did that, and I had told myself, and it's Thursday. Now, Thursday was family group day. Everybody brought their spouses, moms or dads or whatever, right? So the room's huge. The room's full of not only the clients, but their family members. And we just had these big group sessions on Thursdays. Whitney, one of the girls that's in the program, who works there now, she's amazing, looks at my wife and says, hey, Felice, how do you feel about LT's relapse? And I was just like, I was mad. Like, wait, are you serious? You're going to bring this up right now? Yeah. And it was the best time to ever bring it up. And so all families, all addicts that were in the room start chewing on us. And then finally my counselor, thank God I had this counselor who was old school, had to just roughly tell me how things are to get through this knucklehead. And he looks at me after he yelled at my wife first. He's like, stop telling me what he did is good. You're believing his bill of good, blah, blah, blah. She starts kind of crying and looks at me and he's like, let me get this straight. You checked yourself into a detox because you got a drinking problem. You're in this program because you got a drinking problem. And now you're going to go drink to prove you don't have a drinking problem. It clicked. I haven't been the same since that day as far as recovery goes.
I knew a lot of people in AA who didn't like that phrase that you're powerless over alcohol. No, I'm not.
Right.
I went through the same thing.
Yeah.
So you've been clean ever since?
Yep. 5 years this October.
And you have a program yourself, Recovering Addict.
Yep.
Describe it.
So I saw a gap after I got out of my program, and then I went back to work, and since my son died, my relationship with God has improved. I have had a paradigm shift of what's important in life, and for me. And what's important in life is not to be able to make a big house payment or to have nice cars and be able to afford the payments that go around those cars. None of that stuff I could care less about. So I sold my house right at the peak of the market in Pleasant View. So we got a bunch of money. I paid everything off, all the debts we had. We had a lot. Paid all that off. I downsized my whole family into a 2-bedroom apartment because I'm changing everything in my life. And then I look around the community in Weber County and I see a gap. There's nothing long-term. Us addicts it takes a long time to change. How long does it take to build a habit, right? It's more than 66 days. It takes years. You want to lose weight and really get fit, you're looking at 3-year progress.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Anything in life.
I did mine for 40 years. You know, you can't cure it. You can't fix it in 30 days.
No, exactly. So I see that is missing from and I'm young and new into this. I'm just barely researching anything. And then I see the financial burden for people. I'm like, people are not going because either one, they don't have insurance, rich mommy and daddy are sick of paying for it, or they obviously don't have money themselves. So it needs to be free. So I was like, I took some money that we made. I bought in to a gym called Iron House. And out of there, we just started meeting in the parking lot on tires. And I would just invite people, show up, we'll work out for a second, and then we'll sit and talk about it. And that was about 5 years ago. About 4.5 years ago. And it's just grown. I started a YouTube channel in 2020 called Recovering Addict. I'm like, what should I name this? Recovering Addict. Oh, it's not taken.
Clever.
I'll do that. That's the only reason it's that name. Yeah. And so I started making YouTube videos, and I got about 10 deep into, your typical YouTube type videos of, YouTuber. And COVID hit. And once COVID hit, I was like, man, everything's shut down. NA, AA, all the stuff. So I was like, honey, we're going live.
We have about a minute left. So tell me about the place that you have now.
It's in Ogden. It's on 12th Street. We meet Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 6 to 8. It's absolutely free. So if you show up, you just walk in the door. And if you're good for us and we're good for you, you can come and stay as long as you want. The first hour, we work out physically. The second hour, we'll go through 12 steps or relapse prevention books because we are peer certified and relapse prevention specialists through the Terrence Gorski model. And we're going to do that, and you can come and
people stay there or not?
No, it's not a sober living.
Okay.
It's a show-up kind of place. So Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 6 to 8.
So you call it an intensive outpatient program?
Yes. And we don't mess around. We set goals, and we make sure you hit those goals.
I would probably mess with you if I came in. Let's see. Well, next time around, you're not going to publicize the fact that you're going to make a trek like that.
Oh, I'm going to publicize it. I'm just not going to focus my attention on it.
Oh, okay. All right. Then we want to have you back and have you talk about how you made it.
I will.
Okay? Mm-hmm. Amazing, isn't it?
Right? You're super inspirational.
Thank you.
Yeah, you really are. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
sharing this story. And thank you for watching or listening to another edition of Odyssey House Journals.